with the Reverend Kate Botley and Jason Mohammed. BBC Radio 2.
Well, that should get you moving. Welcome to Good Morning Sunday with Jason Mohammed and me, the Reverend Kate Botley, launching straight into our Sir Cliff Richard at 80 special with his 1979 number one hit, We Don't Talk Anymore.
Yes, Kate, our guest this morning is not only celebrating a big birthday, but some even more remarkable numbers. He has sold an incredible 250 million records, is the third best-selling artist in the UK after Elvis and the Beatles. Found faith at the peak of his fame, had it tested more than once and came back even stronger.
He's now written a new autobiography called The Dreamer, and his new studio album, his 47th album, called Music, the Air That I Breathe. He turned 80 last Wednesday and he's still in fine voice. But before we hear from the birthday boy himself, let's go right back to the beginning, the end of the 1950s, and a fresh-faced Harry Webb, also known as Cliff Richard and the Drifters, bringing rock and roll to coffee shops and theatres across the UK.
So, Cliff, I want to start, if I can, by going back to the Gaumont Theatre, 31st of May 1958. Picture the scene. Cliff Richard and the Drifters are playing. You look out to this wonderful crowd, and for the first time they are screaming your name. Can you still remember that emotion, how that felt, Cliff?
Yeah, I can. It all comes back immediately. I can remember being there, and it was the first show that I'd ever done where they screamed and screamed throughout the whole thing. It was unbelievable. And when I came outside, there were, 200 or 300 people waiting, and I got chased down the road, and as I say in the book, it was so unlikely. I actually took refuge in the gentleman's toilet down there and got helped out by the police.
That'll be the day when I die. Cliff, how old are you at this time then?
I was, 17.
17 years old. That's amazing.
Because I hadn't made my first record at that stage. I think it's June 58, I recorded Move It. So I was still 17. That's why it was all so extraordinary. And it was one of those dreams. I'd seen images of Elvis being screamed at, and I kept thinking, oh, that must be fantastic. And suddenly it started to happen to me.
But taking us back even further, you were born in India, Cliff. Do you remember those days?
I can remember some of them. I was, in fact, 7 years old when my father and mother decided we couldn't live in India anymore. They had got independence, and it was getting a little bit... I don't think the Brits were as welcome as they were originally. So I think my father wisely said, let's go. He wanted to go to Australia, but my mum said, look, I'm taking the kids to England. You could go to Australia if you like. Fortunately, my dad said, no, I'll come with you. So we ended up in England, and that was in 1948. My father had £5 in his pocket. He had a family of 5 and nowhere to stay, so my grandmother, on my mother's side, said, stay with me. And then after a couple of nights, she said, and she had 7 children anyway, so she said, I don't think we can do this. But she said, next door, they've got a room they can rent. My father was quite bright. He worked for a very big company in India called Kellner's, and they had the concession to all the restaurants all around India in the British Railway section of life. So he came and struggled. There was no job. He finally got a job in a hospital where he just wheeled trolleys around with either patients on or medicine on them. So he must have had a real tough time.
And where was this, Cliff, exactly in Britain?
In Cheshunt, in Hertfordshire, a little town. It was called the Berry Green Estate. We got a house there with no furniture, of course. We had two mattresses. My mum and dad lived in one room on a mattress, and we kids lived on 2 mattresses in the other room. It's so vivid to me now that 3 of our meals each week were 2 slices of toast on a plate, and my mum would pour milky tea over it and sprinkle sugar. And that was it. It was a pretty tough time. But my sisters and I we talked many times about our past, and I said, do you ever remember being unhappy? And none of us could, which I think is a fantastic mark for my mum and dad. They must have made it possible for us to feel that this is normal. Don't worry about a thing. Things will be better soon. It was just great, and we never really had any money until I started singing.
That's a beautiful memory. And what about the music then, Cliff? At which point does the guitar come into your story, and music, and your dad finding enough money to buy you a guitar?
Well, Terry Smart, Norman Mitham, and I and a couple of other people were walking up the street, and this Citroen, you know, the old Citroen came, sort of rounded top, looked like a spacecraft, and it pulled up by a newsagent, and it was a warm day, the windows were all down. The guy rushed into the newsagents, and the radio was on, so we came to look at the car. We thought, look at this car, fantastic. And then we heard, since my baby left me, bang. We stood there, and before we could say anything or do anything, the guy came back, threw his packets of cigarettes onto the seat, and drove off. We stood there, and then we said, how do we find who that was? And we all listened to Radio Luxembourg. It was Norman, in the end, who came back and said, I heard the record, and I know who it is. It's a guy called Elvis Presley. After we picked ourselves off the floor, we said, who's going to be called Elvis? You know, it was a name, that name came from outer space, it seemed to us. But we thought, Elvis Presley. I then saved up 4 and 6, what's that, 4, 5, 20, 25p, and went and bought Heartbreak Hotel and played it day in and day out for I don't know how long. And my mother and father put up a lot with that, with me. And in the end, my dad managed to, he'd never liked to buy anything on the never never, as they called it then. And he always said, if you can't afford something, don't get it. But he went against his own advice, and he bought this guitar. It cost £27. And when I started playing it professionally, he hadn't even finished paying for it at that stage. And, you know, it wasn't that I wanted to be a guitarist. It's because Elvis had one hanging around his neck, and it looked great. And I was more into the sort of, will I ever look like a pop star? I did learn chords and stuff. My dad taught me my first chords, and the first song I ever sang was, I think it's called The Prisoner's Song. I think Fats Domino had a go at it. And it only had 3 chords, fortunately. And now, of course, I can do 4 chords.
I have this wonderful image of you stood in front of the mirror with the guitar around your neck and your head thrown back, just like Elvis on the front cover of the album.
Oh, and it wasn't a bad impersonation, because all us young guys at that time, because of Elvis, you know, Elvis had this fantastic quiff of hair. I did mine like that. Looking in the mirror, I thought, oh. Then I spent time trying to get my lip to go, oh. So in the book, I think I call myself a sort of walking impersonation of Elvis.
This is brilliant. It's at this point, I think we should hear Elvis Presley and Heartbreak Hotel.
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell.
We're talking to Sir Cliff Richard here on Good Morning Sunday. Sir Cliff, I've got to ask you, at what point did you tip over from being that person sort of doing an impression of Elvis Presley in your mirror to realising that actually there was something bigger going on?
It was when I got to do Move It, the first record that I made, and it was heard by a TV producer, a guy called Jack Good, who just in the last 2 or 3 years has passed on, I'm afraid, but he was directing a show called Oh Boy. He'd got me and Marty Wilde and Billy Fury and a few others to get together, and we met in a big rehearsal room. He said to me, get rid of the guitar and get rid of the sideburns. I went, oh. He said, stop being Elvis. And, you know, I've never regretted it. I hated it at the time. Taking off my sideburns, I thought, oh no, this is ridiculous. I look naked. Anyway, I did what he told me. And do you know what happened? He, I believe, directed me. And everything that I do today is based on what he said. He'd say to me things when I was singing a song. He said, look, when you get to that one line, I want you to turn right shoulder down, and I want you to look up at, I used to glower at the TV. And he gave me all this sense of being me. It wasn't easy because I still am an Elvis fan. I still believe that his records that I still play make him alive to me. His death was much too premature. I don't think we'd seen the best of him yet.
I'm a huge Elvis fan, so you're speaking my language there. What was it like to suddenly be thrust into that spotlight? Because you weren't a grown-up really yet, were you? I mean, you weren't really old enough to buy the champagne to celebrate your success.
It was pretty unbelievable at first. I mean, how could you... Did I ever think of the future? No. When people started talking to me about, what about we'll set up a pension for you? I said, pension? I'm 20. I don't need a pension. They said, oh, yeah, but when you get older. I said, well, I may not get older than 50. I was too young to be sensible, to be honest with you. It was just that I had a fixation for the music, and you have to have it if you are in our industry, is you're able to block out everything except what you are aiming at. And so when people say, oh, you've had a lot of luck, I have to say, yes, I have. But the difference is, most people like me who have had fame for a while, luck plays a big part, but a lot of people don't grab it by the throat. Most of us grabbed our luck and made it work for us. But I remember my dad saying to me, do you really want to do this? And I went, Dad, I really do want to do this. He said, okay, then from now on, you'll have to be in it and on it, and as best you can, keep the quality up. You'll have to live it like that for the rest of your life. I said, okay. And I remember things like that all the time. Even when I'm singing in front of an audience, I'm thinking, look at this, I've got these thousands of people listening to me. How the heck did I get here? The same thing happens when I wake up in Barbados and pull the curtains and I've got this beautiful view in this big house.
You're listening to Good Morning Sunday, a special programme today with Sir Cliff Richard at 80 on BBC Radio 2. Now, before that trail, it was the young ones, of course, and we were singing along in the studio here. How can you not sing along to that? Some lovely texts coming in as well. Helen's been in touch and she says, I spent a lot of time in Great Ormond Street Hospital when I was little. Cliff was doing pantomime at the Palladium in 1967 and the nurses took a group of children to see it. But I was too poorly. I felt very sorry for myself. But imagine my surprise when the door opened in my hospital room and in walked Cliff. That was 53 years ago, and I have loved him ever since. Thank you, Cliff, says Helen.
Oh, that is so sweet. And Bobby on the text says, good morning. My sister Norma took me to see Cliff at 5.5 years old. I'm now 68 years old, Kate and Jason. He came to LBC Radio where I worked. He signed my arm and I still have the tattoo I had done over the top.
That's dedication.
That is. Keep rocking, Cliff, says Bobby. Well, so much to talk to Cliff about the early days, and we had to mention a certain band that were hot on the heels as rock and roll swept the UK.
The Beatles came, they happened about 5 years after us. We started in 58, and if my memory serves me right, sort of late 62, there was a record out called Love Me Do, Love Me Do, which the Shadows and I loved. We kept thinking, oh, why couldn't we have got that song first? Because we didn't know anything about the Beatles. But it wasn't a massive hit. It was in the top 20, I think, but maybe a little bit low down. Bruce Welch, the rhythm guitarist in the Drifters at that time, we were called the Drifters still, he said to me, I'm having a party tonight. Would you like to come down? We've got the Beatles coming in. I went, oh, yeah, I'd like to meet them. So I went down, and sure enough, John, George, Paul, Ringo, they're all there. And we're sitting in Bruce's kitchen, and we said, look, what have you got coming out next? Oh, they just had Please Please Me, which had gone to number one. And they said, well, we've got something, but we don't know how good it is. And Bruce said, okay, and got his guitar. He said, okay, play it to us. You know, Paul got on the guitar, or was it John? I can't remember. And they played, if there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do. And we're thinking, oh, my God. How could they doubt this? They said, we don't know if it's going to be any good. I said, I guarantee that's going to be your number one. And of course, it kicked off just about everything. But I keep reminding people, and I like to remind them, because even when I managed to help change the copyright rules to go from 50 years to 70, which was very good for us as writers and pop singers, they only went back to 1963 when the Beatles started. And because most people think the world and rock and roll started with the Beatles. But no, it didn't. We started it 5 years earlier. And the thing about the Beatles is They started 5 years after us, but they were darn good. I mean, and they stormed the world. But even then, before them, the Shadows and I were writing songs for ourselves and having number ones with them and everything. So I like to stick my nose in sometimes, say, yeah, you know, they are probably the best, biggest selling band in the world, but we were first.
Shall we hear from the biggest selling band in the world? This is the Beatles and From Me to You. This is Good Morning Sunday, and we're talking to the legend that is Sir Cliff Richard. Let's talk about your movie career. I mean, lots of our listeners will remember The Young Ones and Summer Holiday, which was absolutely huge. What are your memories of that time?
Well, I'd made a couple of movies before, but the difference was that I was introduced as introducing Cliff Richard. So I used to say, well, when I was offered The Young Ones, I said, oh dear, I don't know whether I want to be... They said, we want to make you the star of a British musical. And I said, look, I'd rather do a film where I'm still the newcomer, because if it's a success, I'll be able to say, I'm in that movie. If it's a flop, I could say, well, nothing to do with me. Now, they were wanting me to be the front man of a movie. And I thought, I said, well, okay, can the Shadows write the music? They said, yeah, some of it they can. And then I said, okay, I'll do it. And I just kept feeling to myself, if this is a flop, I have to be prepared to face the flop. And once I was prepared to, I just threw myself into it, as the Shadows did, as we all did. I mean, made lots of good friends. We became a little gang of people, and we made about 3 movies together.
How old were you when you did Summer Holiday? Remind me.
22 or 23. I think 61 Young Ones came out.
Yeah.
And I think either 62 or 63, Summer Holiday came out.
So it was not long after your dad had died, was it?
No, my dad died when I was about 21, so that 61. I think he had seen me make the movie. I'm not sure he saw it come out. That's the horrible part. It still upsets me to think he missed all those big things. But anyway, you know, life goes on, but I just felt it was too early for him to die.
and a level of unfair as well, you know, to not get to see your success in that way. I mean, it must have been quite a formative experience for you, Cliff, your dad dying.
It was. He influenced me more than I thought he ever would. Every time I say something, I think, oh, I remember my dad talking about things like that. And I think if you're lucky, most people's fathers become their heroes. The funny thing is, I have a dream that comes to me now and then, not often enough. It's my dad. My dad is in my dream. Everybody in my dream knows that he has died. And yet he's there and he chats to me. And the strange thing is, I wake up feeling really happy and comfortable. It's very strange, but it doesn't happen often enough for me. But that's how much, I guess, he meant to me.
As part of your dad's death, I understand that that's around the time that you began to explore your faith.
Yes, there was a period early in my career that somehow or another, even though everything was absolutely happening, dreams coming true day after day, there was a point when I kept thinking, I wonder if this is it. Is this it? Is this all there is to it? Isn't there anything else? Isn't there anything in one's life? It got me thinking. And that's when our original bass player, Jet Harris, left us, and we picked up with another bass player who turned out to be a spiritual person. And I spent loads of time talking to him. He is a Jehovah's Witness. And he fed me all the thoughts he had and spoke Bible passages to me and things. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I never knew that. I didn't know the Bible talked about things like that. So he's the one that got me interested. And finally, though, I still feel that I'm happy with spiritual people. I am no longer judgmental. And so I feel that was a big step in my Christian life, because when I first took the step of saying, okay, Jesus, I want you in my life. I need you to be part of my life. Nothing really happened. I didn't hear any big voices or anything, but I felt things slowly change. You know, I kept thinking, if somebody wasn't a Christian, I thought there's something wrong with them. That's gone now. Now I realize that you can meet people of spirituality is prominent in their life. They may not believe exactly as you do, but there is something there that they bow to that is bigger than any of us. All I say to people is, look, you can believe whatever you like, as long as you feel the same about me.
Do you think that your singing is part of your vocation? Do you think it's part of a calling?
Yes, I'm now convinced that everything that is part of us that you can see as good and, in my case, profitable too, is a gift. A voice is a gift. And that's why once I became a Christian, I felt that some of that gift ought to be given back to do something for other people. I remember George Hoffman, he started a charity called Tear Fund, which I supported them for years. And he said to me once, because I came back from Bangladesh and said, I felt useless and helpless. What am I going to do? He said, you know, one man cannot change the world. And then he looked at me and he said, but you can change the world for one man. And I thought, that's exactly right. So we've got to stop thinking about masses of people and just recognize that every one of us has a gift. And if we can give some of it back, it's right to do that.
Good news. I've had that good news.
We are talking to Sir Cliff Richard this morning in celebration of his 80th birthday here on Good Morning Sunday on BBC Radio 2. A very good morning to you, and thank you for your wonderful messages. Eileen Brooks says, I've always been a fan of Cliff. When my husband was on his stag night 50 years ago, he saw Cliff and he signed a £5 note, which I still have. Sadly, my husband died 10 years ago. Oh, Eileen. Thank you, Sir Cliff, for all the songs and all the music. I've seen you live and I enjoy your records.
My mum dropped into conversation this week that she's got a Sir Cliff Richard autograph from the 1950s. I was like,
really?
I never knew that, Mum. It's unbelievable. He gets everywhere. Anyway, Yvonne from Kingston upon Hull has been in touch. She says, been a Cliff fan since 1958 when I went to a concert with my mum. Back in 2017, took my mum to his concert in Scarborough to celebrate her 100th birthday. Sir Cliff was lovely. He met her and brought her a beautiful bouquet and some balloons. He is a lovely man indeed. In the final part of our chat with Sir Cliff, we wanted to try and get to the bottom of how he's kept making music across a whopping 6 decades.
I want to talk about how artists can go in and out of fashion. It's a very ruthless business. And how did you learn to be so resilient, Cliff?
Oh dear, I don't know. I ask myself, even now I think of myself, how the heck did I last 62 years? I told everybody earlier I'd probably not get to be 50 in age, let alone have a 62-year-old career. But it wasn't until the Shadows and I recorded an album called Established 58, and we released it in 1968. It was in the charts, top 10 anyway. And I thought, oh my goodness, we were written off in the early days as one-hit wonders. Or another phrase I saw was, here today, gone tomorrow.
Yes.
Suddenly 10 years had come, I was still recording and singing. It's the first time it hit me that it might be possible for rock and roll to allow someone like me to have longevity. You tend to kind of sometimes believe what people write about you. Well, I've learned my lesson now. So I just feel that if you want longevity, you have to work at it. And in a way, you know, for me, people like me, if you get to be 62 years of career, you can only be grateful. I don't have sleepless nights over maybe a lack of major airplay. I just still like making records. And even though, you know, nowadays, for instance, the whole record world is suffering terribly. We used to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, and now we're not. And here's the indication. If I sell 100,000 records, I get a gold disc. I'm still happy to get those gold discs.
Yes.
But 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had to sell 1 million records to get one gold disc. That's the difference now. I sat with Rod Stewart once at a charity evening, and he said, oh, don't you wish you were singing now? I went, Rod, no, I don't. You know, I've sold close to 300 million records in my career. Rod must have done that or more, maybe, I don't know. But I said, no, we got the best of it. We had records that sold millions. And nowadays you can be number one and maybe be lucky to sell 40 or 50,000 a week. When Rod and I and Elton and everybody else, the Beatles, when we had our number ones, we'd be selling at some point 80,000 a day.
But also, I want you to know at this point in the interview that the music you've made and the records that you've made, and you know this, they've got special places in our hearts. Kate and I are big movie fans, and we were talking before we interviewed you today about Devil Woman being used in I, Tonya.
Yeah.
And I said to Kate, I absolutely loved that record when it first came out. And these records, these are the soundtrack to our lives, Cliff.
I know. Well, it's, I mean, A Devil Woman was off-the-wall record because when I got it sent to me by the writer Terry Britton, it was so different to Living Doll or Congratulations or Move It. And I thought, would the fans be happy with me singing this kind of funky record? And then I thought, oh, what the heck, we better try. And Bruce Welch from The Shadows produced it. It was a dream because it was also Elton, his record company, released it in America. And it got to number 6 or something, or 4 in Cashbox charts over there. So, and we don't talk anymore. It was the only other top 10 hit I had over there. But Devil Woman, it's just a great song, great lyric, and great guitar riffs. To me, it's a sort of perfect pop rock record.
It's a brilliant song. I absolutely love it. Let's hear it. This is Devil Woman by Cliff Richard. Devil Woman by Cliff Richard. You're listening to Good Morning Sunday, a very special programme as we are talking to Sir Cliff Richard on our programme today. Cliff, I also want to tell you that when we go on holiday as a family, there's only one song we sing on the way to the airport, and that's Summer Holiday.
I know. I went to a school, they asked me to go. The chauffeur I used to use, who, car hire chauffeur, and I used to use him regularly, and he said to me, my wife works in a junior school, could you come down? I said, well, look, I could come down. I can't remember, they were opening a new wing or something like that. I mean, they won't know who I am. He said, oh, no, I think they will. So anyway, he said, bring your guitar. The children were sitting there, and I said, I'll just sing one song. So I went, we're all going, and they all joined me it's because of what you just said. Whenever their dad drove off for a holiday, he took that record or sang that in the car with them. I was thrilled. All these 6 and 7-year-olds going, we're all going on a summer holiday. It was very funny, but very nice.
Very wonderful. Can I just ask you a little more about your faith, if I may, Cliff, because your close friend Jill Dando was killed more than 20 years ago. Around that time, you said you felt your faith was tested. That must have been a really difficult ordeal, traumatic. How did you get through it? And did your faith ultimately get you through it?
It was a terrible time for all of us who were friends of hers because, I don't know about you, it's the first time ever known and loved someone who got murdered. I mean, she was murdered. And so we were shocked. And I did an interview right after it. I can't remember with whom, I don't know, probably with Gloria Hunniford, who was also great friends with Jill. We were a gang together. But I said it's the first time that I got angry with God. How could you do this? The first thing when something really bad's happened, what do? We blame God. Even people that don't believe in him blame him. So I said, how could this happen? She was such a beautiful, wonderful person. Nobody's perfect, but she was pretty close. And so I was really angry. And it took me a while to slowly calm down and say, look, there are so many things out of our hands. God doesn't actually intervene every day in our lives. Otherwise, we wouldn't have cancer killing us or a pandemic. It doesn't work that way. But I found that the more I prayed about it, the less I got angry with him. Slowly it pulled away.
And in our darkest times, we do turn to our faith. And you've had, I think it's fair to describe this, Cliff, a rough couple of years with the false criminal allegations and the subsequent court case with the BBC.
Yep.
Did you have to turn to your faith to help you through it? Because I know just how traumatic this was for you.
No, I've thought about this a lot. I often think, how would I have got through it? Without family, without friends, without fans, and no way would I have made it without God. There were times, like I woke up every night for nearly 2 years at 3:15 in the morning. It was the most horrific time. But every day I prayed and prayed and prayed. I even prayed for my accuser, who I don't even know who he is to this day. I have no idea. I didn't know. I couldn't figure out, why would he do this? We probably never met. Why would he do it? But I had that opening, and I knew that God was listening. And it slowly came to me that I knew I didn't do it. God knew I didn't do it. My friends knew I didn't do it. And do you know what? The other person is the accuser. He must know I didn't do this. So slowly, by praying about it, it gave me a strength. But it's all behind me now. When people say, are you over it? I say, no, I'm past it. But I don't think I'm ever going to get over it. There's no way I can get over that. It was so horrific and unreal. I'm past it. But getting over it, I don't think I will.
And so, as a man of 80 now, looking back on all this, looking back on the ups, the downs, the highs and the lows, everything you've been through, everything you've celebrated, if you could walk back into that Soho coffee shop where that 17-year-old is with that guitar around his neck, what would you say to your younger self? Sat there with his milky coffee.
I would say, sit down a minute. I'm going to shock you. You are not only going to be 50 years old, you're going to be 80 years old, and you're going to have a career behind you that lasted 62 years. And he would say, oh, get out of here. He wouldn't believe me. It's hard for me to believe that here I am, I'm still talking to you on the radio, which I thought might have been in my past by now. It's beyond explanation. And I think it's best I don't know. If someone said to me, oh, it's the way you smile, I'd go around with this sickly smile all the time. No, now I don't know. I just live my life like I've always lived it. Get an idea to do something, try and follow it through, and try not to let anything spoil it. So I don't know, but that's what I'd say to him. I'd say, look, you're never going to believe this, but you will be here 62 years from now.
And so that's looking back. Obviously, you know, you're 80, Cliff. You're going to retire now, surely, to goodness.
Well, retire's not in my word, my
Do you know,
vocabulary.
There's no shock there. I knew the answer to that question before I asked it.
No, I don't want to retire, but all I want to do, one day, and you won't know it's happened, I'm going to stop. My manager said to me, you mean retire? I said, no, I'm just going to stop. I don't want to retire, because if I decide to do a concert tour again, I don't want people to say, oh, he's made a comeback. You know, every time I see people who do comebacks, my immediate thought is, oh my God, they ran out of money. I don't want anybody thinking that about me.
Well, your dad made you take that pension out when you were little, so I doubt that's going to happen. Thank goodness for that, eh? But the singing, I mean, what is it about singing? Because, you know, you've got this new album out, you're still making music. What does singing do for you?
There's something about, I guess if you asked a painter, why do you like painting? I guess it's because they can paint their feelings. And for a singer, it's just that, it's like when I first heard my voice back recording Schoolboy Crush and Move It, the first combination of songs on that first single, it was impossible. You know, I'd been singing into a Grundig tape recorder. No one's ever heard of that. I'm sure none of the listeners heard of a Grundig. But this tiny thing with two big wheels that went round, and sometimes the tape got stuck. It was magic, absolutely magic. Look, congratulations, Bachelor Boy. They're just fun, fabulous pop songs. But if you got a Devil Woman, that's a story to tell. If you're singing Miss You Nights, it's a beautiful love song. And so therefore, as a singer, the chance you get is to express a feeling, not on a canvas, but in digits on a record.
Well, Cliff, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. I've loved, as a radio presenter, playing your records. I've loved dancing to your records. I've loved singing Summer Holiday in the car to the kids who love your records as well. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're very kind. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. And Jason, thank you so much.
On behalf of BBC Radio 2, can we wish you a very happy birthday? We're not going to sing because we're going to leave that to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Many happy returns, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you to Cliff for talking to us. It was just absolutely wonderful. We had a really lovely time, didn't we, Kate?
We
and
did.
He gave us so much as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Did Sir Cliff.
Yeah.
So thank you to him and, of course, our superb BBC Radio 2 production team.
Yeah. To play us out, this is from Sir Cliff's new album, Music, the Air That I Breathe. This is Falling For You. Take care of yourselves. We're both off next week.
We are indeed, yeah.
Dr. Rangan Chatterjee is going to be sitting in for us, so he'll be keeping the seat warm.